I never imagined that grief could have layers, like a wound that keeps tearing open, one memory at a time. When my husband, Richard Lawson, died, I thought the pain of losing him would be the worst thing I would ever have to endure. I was wrong. The morning of his funeral felt unreal, as if I were walking through someone else's nightmare. I remember the sound of rain tapping the church windows, and the scent of lilies filling the air. His favorite flowers. People always said lilies symbolized purity and peace, but to me they smelled like endings. I sat in the front row, hands trembling in my lap, my black dress clinging to my skin. My daughter Emily was beside me, holding my arm as if I might fall apart. And in truth, I might have. My son Michael stood near the casket with his little family, trying to appear strong, but his red, swollen eyes betrayed him. I had been married to Richard for 42 years. 42 years of laughter, arguments, shared dreams, broken promises, holidays, hospital visits, grandchildren, and everything a marriage could hold. We weren't perfect. No marriage is. But I loved him, even in the moments when he disappointed me, even when he forgot birthdays, or came home late with excuses that didn't quite sound right. He was my husband. I thought I knew everything about him. When the priest invited me to speak, my legs felt heavy. I wasn't ready, but I forced myself to stand. The room blurred as tears gathered, but I steadied my breath. Richard was a good man, I began, my voice trembling. He wasn't perfect, but he loved his family. He loved us. And I... The church doors suddenly swung open with a loud echo that made everyone turn. A group of 4 people, 2 women, a teenager and a little boy, walked in. They were dressed in black, just like us. The older woman, around my age, was holding the young boy's hand. The younger woman, no older than 30, clutched a folded piece of paper. The teenager, maybe 16, had tears streaming down her face. I didn't recognize them. But my heart began pounding in a way I couldn't explain, as if something inside me already knew. They walked straight down the aisle, not sitting in the back like late guests would. They came closer, until they reached the casket. The younger woman placed her trembling hand on it, whispering something I couldn't hear. The church was silent, uncomfortably silent, until the teenager suddenly turned around, faced the entire room and spoke through shaky breaths. We deserve to be here. He was our father, too. A ripple of gasps spread through the church, followed by whispers, shock, and confusion. My world tilted. I felt the air leave my lungs, as if someone had punched me straight in the chest. I stared at the girl, then at the older woman, then at the younger one, and the resemblance was unmistakable. Their eyes, their jawline, the same shape as Richard's. No, I whispered, shaking my head slowly, my hands gripping the podium. No, that's not possible. The older woman looked at me directly, her expression filled with a mixture of sorrow and shame. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "But I think you know. Deep down you must know." Emily stood up angrily. "What in the world are you talking about?" The younger woman wiped her tears and spoke with a broken voice. "He promised he'd tell you one day. He just never did." The room began spinning. I felt Emily's hand grip my arm, but her voice sounded far away, muffled by the roaring in my ears. "Richard, my husband, had another family." The words circled my mind like vultures, ripping apart every memory I had protected for decades. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. My throat burned, my stomach churned, and the ground beneath me felt unstable. I grabbed the edge of the podium to keep from collapsing. The older woman finally spoke, barely above a whisper. "My name is Margaret, and I was with Richard for 27 years. 27 years. 27. That wasn't a fling. That wasn't a mistake. That was a life, a second life, a second family. A betrayal so deep, it didn't just break my heart. It shattered my entire existence. My knees gave out, and I sank into the front pew. My vision blurred as everything I knew about my marriage, my family, my husband, my life was pulled out from under me like a rug. And as I stared at the casket holding the man I loved, all I could think was, who did I marry? Because the man lying in that coffin was suddenly a stranger. I don't remember much from the rest of the funeral service. Just muffled voices, distant sobs, and the pounding sound of my own heartbeat, thudding in my ears. My fingers were ice cold, yet my face burned with humiliation. Every pair of eyes felt like a blade cutting into me. People whispered behind tissues. Some avoided looking at me altogether. Others stared with morbid curiosity, as if I were part of a scandalous scene in a drama. But nothing compared to the moment I locked eyes with the woman who claimed to be my husband's wife. She stood near the coffin, my husband's coffin, with that little girl clinging to her skirt. Her face was pale, eyes red from crying, but there was something in her expression, a mixture of guilt and defiance. The priest approached me quietly and whispered, "Elizabeth, do you want to continue the service or postpone it? Postpone his funeral? Because of them?" I swallowed the prickling pain in my throat and forced the words out. "No. Continue." My voice trembled, but I stood tall. My daughters, Emma and Claire, came closer, flanking me like protective guards. We were grieving. But now we were also humiliated, betrayed, crushed. When the service ended, everyone moved to the reception hall. I needed a moment alone, so I stayed inside the empty chapel, staring at the coffin, at his name engraved in gold, William James Montgomery, beloved husband, father, and friend. Beloved husband? Husband to who exactly? I didn't even realize the tears were falling until they hit my trembling hands. My knees gave way, and I sat in the front pew, silently breaking. I whispered to him, voice cracking, "How could you do this to us, William?" "To me?" A soft voice interrupted my misery. "Mrs. Montgomery?" I looked up and saw the same woman, her other wife, standing a few feet away. The little girl wasn't with her. Before I could speak, rage hit me like a flame. "Don't you dare call me that!" I snapped through clenched teeth. She flinched, her shoulders curling inward. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cause a scene. I just needed to say goodbye to him. Goodbye? After what she just dropped like a bomb in the middle of my husband's funeral. "Who are you?" I demanded, voice sharper than I intended. She took a shaky breath. "My name is Sarah Doyle, and I was with William for 22 years. My ears rang. 22 years, I repeated slowly, making sure I hadn't misheard. She nodded, lips trembling. I felt as if the floor tilted beneath me. William and I were married for 40 years. 40! And she was claiming more than half of that timeline, overlapped with mine. My hands tightened on the pew. "You're lying," I said, though deep down, something inside me cracked because a small part of me feared she wasn't. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I loved him too. I know you won't believe me, but he loved us both. Loved us both." The audacity was like salt in a fresh wound. "I don't need to listen to this," I muttered, standing up to leave. But she reached into her purse with trembling fingers. I brought proof," she whispered. I froze. She handed me a small envelope, thick, heavy. My name was written on, not in her handwriting, in William's. My breath hitched. My skin turned cold. "He told me to give you this, if he ever died," she said, voice breaking into sobs. "He didn't want to hurt you. He was trying to find a way to tell you. I swear he was." A fierce storm of emotions crashed inside me. Anger, confusion, disbelief, betrayal, but also a sickening curiosity. My fingers shook as I held the envelope, still warm from her hand. I stared at the handwriting I had seen 1,000 times in birthday cards, notes on the fridge, love letters from when we were young. I didn't open it. Not yet. Sarah wiped her tears. Please, just read it before you decide what to think of me. And if you want to talk, I'll be at the reception. She turned and walked away, leaving me alone with the envelope that suddenly weighed as heavy as a tombstone. My knees nearly buckled. I sank back down, clutching that letter to my chest, as if it were a live grenade, because it was. My hands shook violently. I wanted to rip it open right there. But I was terrified of what was inside, terrified that the life I built, the marriage I devoted myself to, the loyalty, sacrifices, the love I held for that man, might have all been a lie. I forced myself to walk to the reception hall. The moment I entered, conversations went silent. Heads turned. Some looked at me with sympathy, others with pity, and a few with thinly veiled fascination. People love tragedy when it happens to someone else. My daughters rushed to me. "Mom, are you okay?" Claire whispered. I didn't answer. I glanced across the room and saw Sarah sitting in a corner, holding the little girl. Her daughter. His daughter. Or so she claimed. The child had William's eyes, the same hazel green shade. The resemblance hit me like a bullet. My heart cracked again. Emma squeezed my hand. "Mom, who are those people? Why did she say she was Dad's wife?" I looked at my 2 adult daughters, women in their late 30s, and felt a wave of guilt wash over me. They deserved the truth, but I didn't have it yet. So I said the only thing I could, in a faint whisper. I don't know. But that was a lie, too. A terrible, frightening part of me did know, even if I didn't want to admit it, because suddenly, memories I had buried came clawing back. The late-night work trips, the business, meetings, the unexplained phone calls, the weekends he said he needed to clear his head. The signs had always been there. I just never wanted to believe them. I stood frozen, watching Sarah across the room. She looked just as broken as I felt. I hated her, but a part of me pitied her too. Because if what she said was true, we were both victims of the same man. While I tried to keep my dignity intact, an older man slowly approached me. He had been a close business partner of William's for years. Richard Lowe. His expression was tense, uneasy, as if he knew something he wished he didn't. "Elizabeth," he said gently. "Can we speak privately?" "Not him too." I swallowed hard. "Richard, if you knew anything at all, and didn't tell me, I swear." He raised a hand, stopping me. I didn't know everything, but I knew something wasn't right. My stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" Richard glanced around the room, then leaned in closer. "There were rumors at the company, whispers that William was leading a double life. I confronted him once. He told me it was complicated and begged me not to interfere." My heart dropped to my feet. "You knew," I whispered, voice shaking with betrayal. "I wasn't certain," he replied, guilt overwhelming his face. I asked him if there was another woman. He didn't deny it, but he didn't admit it either. I thought it was an affair, not another family. I felt dizzy. My ears rang. 2 people, within an hour, had confirmed the possibility that my husband, the man I adored for 4 decades, the father of my children, the man I nursed through his last breath, might have lived a lie. With us. With them. My grip tightened on the unopened letter. Richard placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Elizabeth, before you read whatever is in that envelope, prepare yourself. It might break you." Break me? I was already breaking. That night I sat alone in my bedroom. The house felt colder without William's presence. His smell still lingered in the pillows. His slippers were still by the bed. His watch sat on the nightstand as if he'd return for it. But he wouldn't. And now, I wasn't even sure who I had lost. The letter lay on my lap. My fingers hovered over the seal. I whispered, "Why, William? Why did you do this to us?" Then, with a trembling breath, I tore it open. Inside were 3 pages, handwritten. The first line shattered me. "My dearest Liz, If you're reading this, it means I didn't get the chance to tell you the truth myself. I covered my mouth as a sob escaped. The room spun. Every word that followed felt like a knife, slowly plunging deeper into my heart. I stared at the first page of William's letter, my hands trembling so violently that the paper rustled as if shivering with me. His familiar handwriting, steady, elegant, unmistakably his, felt like a cruel ghost reaching out to touch me from beyond the grave. For 40 years I had always found comfort in his written words. The love letters he slipped into my purse before business trips, notes he stuck on the bathroom mirror, birthday cards that always ended with, "Forever yours, Will." But this letter, this one wasn't written to comfort me. It was written to confess, and confessions rarely bring peace. "My dearest Liz," he wrote, "if you're reading this, it means I didn't get the chance to tell you the truth myself. And I know that reading it this way is the last thing you deserve. But I couldn't let you leave this world without knowing the full story. My story, our story, and the mistake that became too big to fix." My heart clenched. Mistake. He was calling 20 years with another family. A mistake. I kept reading, breath shaking. "Before anything else, you must know this. I loved you. Truly. Deeply. More than I ever knew a man could love a woman. You were not second. You were not less. You were my home, my anchor, my greatest blessing in this life." I let out a painful laugh. A broken one. Was this supposed to soften the betrayal? But I did something unforgivable. I created a second life, and by the time I realized how wrong it was, I was in too deep, and people I cared about would be destroyed no matter what decision I made. My chest tightened so hard I pressed my palm against it, struggling to breathe. A second life. He admitted it. Seeing it written in his own hand made it real. Undeniably real. I forced myself to keep reading. I met Sarah at a time when we were struggling. "Liz, you remember those years? When we were distant, when the girls were teenagers, when you and I couldn't go a day without arguing. I felt you slipping away, and instead of being a man and fighting for us, I ran. A wave of memories hit me. The late 90s. The financial pressure. The relocation for his work. Emma acting out at school. Claire shutting herself away. And yes, we argued. We were exhausted, overwhelmed, disconnected. But while I stayed fighting for our family, he found comfort elsewhere. I squeezed the paper, my nails digging into it. It began as a friendship. I swear to you, Liz, I didn't plan to fall for her. I kept telling myself it was harmless. Someone to talk to. Someone who wasn't angry with me. Who made me feel seen again. And before I knew it, I cared. Too much. When I tried to walk away, it was already too late. I closed my eyes, tears slipping down my cheeks. He was painting himself as a lonely victim of circumstance, of emotional neglect, of marriage hardship, as if that justified betrayal. No. We all go through rough years in marriage. We all face storms. But I stayed. He found shelter in another woman. The first lie was the hardest, Liz. After that, the rest came easier. Too easy. I told myself I could manage it. 2 lives, 2 households, 2 versions of myself. I convinced myself no one would get hurt if I kept everything separate. Separate. That word sliced through my heart. He lived 2 lives so seamlessly that I never saw it. Not truly. Then I reached the part that nearly made me drop the letter. When I found out Sarah was pregnant, everything changed. I knew then the lie had become a living, breathing human being. I became a father again. And I couldn't abandon my child. My breath caught in my throat. Pregnant. A child. That little girl at the funeral. His daughter. While I was sending my daughters to college, he was raising another child elsewhere. Tears blurred the ink, and I angrily wiped them away, not wanting to smudge his confession. His truth, no matter how painful. I told myself I would tell you. So many times I came close, but every time something stopped me. Emma's wedding, Claire's graduation, your mother falling sick. There was always a reason to wait, a little longer. A sob escaped me. There is always a reason to postpone a painful truth. Cowards use later as a shield. As the years passed, the lie grew so large it felt like if I spoke it aloud, the world would collapse. And I couldn't choose who to hurt, Liz. Because no matter what I did, someone I loved would shatter. Someone he loved. Loved both of us, he claimed. Yet love would have been honesty. Love would have been loyalty. Love would have been not letting two innocent families live a lie. My vision blurred again. I never wanted the two worlds to collide. I planned to tell you everything once the girls were older. Once it would hurt less. But there is no less pain for what I did. I know that now. Yes, he knew. But far, far too late. I am not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I am asking you to believe that my love for you was real. You were not a duty. You were not a habit. You were the first woman I loved. And the last. I pressed a shaking hand against my mouth to hold in a cry. He continued. There is more you need to know. About Sarah, about the child, about the truth behind the choices I made. I won't justify myself, but you deserve the whole story. And I am begging you, Liz, please hear Sarah out. She is not the villain in this story. I am. My heart twisted painfully. I am so sorry. For all of it. For the lies. For the betrayal. For the years you spent loving a man who kept a darkness hidden beneath the surface. The only truth that was ever pure was that I loved you, Liz. That was real. Always yours, Will. When I finished reading, the room fell into a deafening silence. I sat there, clutching the letter, my body shaking. Not just from heartbreak, but from rage. He wanted me to hear Sarah out, to understand her, to extend compassion to the woman who shared my husband's bed. I stood up so abruptly the chair scraped across the floor. No more tears tonight. I marched toward the living room mirror and stared at the reflection of a woman who had just aged 10 years in one day. A woman who had been stabbed by the very person she trusted most. I whispered to myself, I will hear her out. But not for him, for me. Because after 40 years of living in a marriage wrapped in lies, I needed the truth, every last piece of it, even if it destroyed me. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? The letter lay on the nightstand like a venomous snake, silent but deadly. Each time I closed my eyes, William's words replayed in my mind, tearing fresh wounds open again and again. Please hear Sarah out. She is not the villain. I am. I hated that he said that. I hated that he tried to soften her role, that he still protected her, even in death, as though I was expected to share my grief with the woman who stole half my life. Yet, something inside me, something exhausted, abandoned, and desperate for answers, knew I had to speak to her. If I didn't, his betrayal would remain unfinished, like a book with its last chapters missing. And I needed the truth, not for closure. I doubted there could ever be closure, but for understanding. By morning, I had made my decision. I would meet her. The meeting. I didn't invite her to my home. I couldn't stomach seeing her in the space William and I built together. The thought of her sitting on the same sofa he once held me on, or drinking from the same cups we shared. No, it would be too cruel. Instead, I chose a quiet cafe in town. Neutral, cold, safe. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting at a table tucked away in the corner as if trying to make herself smaller. She looked fragile, her eyes swollen from crying. In her hands, she held a tissue she kept twisting and untwisting. When she saw me, she stood up slowly. Elizabeth, thank you for coming. Her voice was soft, barely above a whisper. I sat down without responding. She resumed her seat. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. A waitress approached, but I raised a hand. Not yet. My eyes locked on hers. I kept my voice steady, controlled, though every muscle in my body was tense. "Did you know I existed?" Her face fell. "Yes," she whispered. "I did." The admission hit like a slap. "So you knew he had a family, a wife, children, and that didn't stop you?" Tears flooded her eyes instantly. "I was 28 when I met him. Young, naive. I believed him when he said the marriage was nearly over, that you'd grown apart. He told me you no longer loved him." My chest constricted. "He said I didn't love him?" I blinked away a sting of tears. "He lied. I know that now," she said, voice breaking. "But back then, he made it sound like you were staying together, only for your daughters. He told me he felt lonely in his own home." I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. Lonely in our home, while I worked 2 jobs to support him through his early business struggles. While I cared for the girls, cooked, cleaned, kept the household functioning like a war general. He was lonely? No. He was selfish. Sarah continued. "I told him I didn't want to be the other woman. He promised me he'd leave and start a life with me, but he never did. Every year he pushed it forward. After the holidays, after your daughter's graduation, after your mother passed." I scoffed bitterly. "I'm sure he gave you a long list of excuses." She nodded, ashamed. "Yes, and I believed every one of them." She looked at me with trembling lips. "Elizabeth, I didn't stay because I enjoyed sharing him. I stayed because I loved him. I thought eventually he would choose us openly. Choose." The word twisted the knife deeper. "So you waited. For 22 years. She nodded. "I was a fool." For a moment I just stared at her. Truly stared. She wasn't glamorous. She wasn't seductive. She wasn't the stereotype of the other woman. She was ordinary, simple, fragile, a woman who had built a life on stolen time and borrowed promises. But knowing that didn't soften the pain. "Why show up at the funeral?" I asked sharply. She inhaled shakily. "Because my daughter deserved to say goodbye to her father. Her daughter. The child. A living reminder of my husband's betrayal." "What's her name?" I asked, though the question tasted bitter. "Lily," she whispered. "She's 14. My age when William proposed to me flashed in my mind. The innocence, the hope, the certainty that love meant forever. And here he was, fathering a child with another woman, while I stood by his side believing in us." My voice dropped to a whisper. "Was he a good father to her?" Sarah's eyes softened. Painful. "Yes, he adored her. He tried to be present. Birthdays, school events, weekends. But it was all in secret." A nauseating wave washed over me. "Those weekends he said he was visiting old college friends or needing time to rest at the cabin. He was with them. And you accepted that? That your daughter only got half a father? A stolen father?" Sarah swallowed hard. "No, I hated it. But I was already in love. And Lily, she adored him. He was gentle, patient, kind with her. And I couldn't take him away from her." For a brief second, something unexpected flickered inside me. A painful, reluctant understanding. Not forgiveness, not sympathy. Just the recognition of a mother trying to protect her child. But then reality slapped me again. "You stole him from my children." Sarah shook her head instantly. "No, he chose to leave them in pieces. That was his decision. His selfishness." Her words hung in the air. For the first time, she placed blame not on circumstance, but on him. The tears she'd been holding finally spilled. "Elizabeth, I never wanted to hurt you, and I know that doesn't matter now. I can't undo what's been done. I just—" Her voice cracked. "I needed you to know I suffered too. Loving a man who belonged to someone else isn't romantic. It's agony. I lived in the shadows of your marriage for 2 decades. I stared at her through tears of my own. We both suffered. For different reasons, at different intensities. From the same man." Her next words shook me. "There's something you don't know. Something important. And I need to tell you before you hate me more than you already do." My breath stilled. Important. "What now?" I whispered. She closed her eyes briefly as if gathering courage. "When Lily was born, William made a choice. One that affected your family more than you'll ever realize." My pulse quickened. "What choice?" Her lips trembled. "The company. The money. The inheritance. The trust fund." She looked at me with apology in her eyes. "Half of everything wasn't yours to begin with." The world tilted. I gripped the table to keep myself upright. "What are you talking about?" Sarah leaned in, voice barely audible, each word like a bomb dropping. "William rewrote his will 7 years ago. Half of his assets, half of the shares, half of the estate, belongs to Lily." My blood ran cold. "Half. He divided our life, our work, our sacrifices. Right down the middle. Between my daughters. And his secret one." Sarah whispered. "You don't know the whole truth yet, Elizabeth. There was a reason he changed the will. A reason he couldn't walk away. A reason everything was far more complicated than an affair." She swallowed hard. "And if you don't hear the rest, you'll hate the wrong person." Her words hung in the air like smoke. Suffocating. Toxic. Impossible to ignore. Half of everything. Half of the company. Half of the estate. Half of the life I helped build. Given. To a child I never knew existed. I felt the ground shifting beneath me. Like the life I knew was cracking open and revealing something far darker underneath. I forced my voice to, "Steady, explain, now." Sarah nodded, her fingers twisting that poor tissue again, nearly shredding it. "When Lily was born, William panicked. He was terrified of the truth coming out, terrified of losing everything. So he tried to protect both sides. Or at least," she swallowed. "That's what he told himself." I said nothing. I wanted her to keep talking, to dig her own grave with the truth. She continued, voice trembling. "He set up a trust. For Lily, quietly. He told me it was temporary, that once he left your marriage, everything would be above board. But the years passed and he never left, and the more time that passed, the more trapped he became." "Trapped?" I whispered bitterly. "He trapped us. All of us." She nodded, eyes red with shame. "You're right. He did." She inhaled shakily. 7 years ago. Something happened. Something that changed everything. William came to me one night looking like he'd aged 10 years in an hour. He said he'd been to the doctor. He told me he was sick." My breath stilled. "Sick? Yes." She continued softly. "He'd been diagnosed with a heart condition. A serious one. The same condition that killed his father. He said he didn't know how long he had." My chest tightened. "He never told me. I cared for him through his last years. Through what I thought were ordinary symptoms of aging. Tiredness, short breath, fatigue. But he never told me he knew." Sarah's voice cracked. "He said he couldn't die without making sure Lily would be taken care of. He was afraid that if he didn't protect her legally, your family would erase her from existence." A deep, visceral pain shot through my chest. My pulse roared in my ears. "Erase her? I would never punish an innocent child!" I snapped, tears of rage rising. "He should have told me." She nodded quickly. "I know, and I told him that. I begged him to be honest, but he was terrified. He said he'd lose you. He said your daughters would hate him, that everything would explode." "It exploded anyway," I whispered. "Yes," she said softly. "But he didn't plan to die yet, Elizabeth. He rewrote his will thinking he had time. Time to prepare everyone, time to explain, time to fix what he broke." My voice came out hollow. "Except he ran out of time," Mira nodded, tears falling silently. For a moment, silence wrapped around us, heavy, suffocating, tragic. Then she continued, her voice barely a whisper. "There's something else. Something you need to hear." I lifted my head, wary, exhausted, but needing the truth like oxygen. Sarah's eyes softened with something I didn't expect. sincerity. William never stopped loving you. He talked about you all the time, even with me, even when it hurt. He'd tell me how strong you were, how proud he was of you, how you held the family together. He adored you, Elizabeth. That was real. My throat burned. Tears pooled again, unwanted but unstoppable. Then why didn't he end it? I choked out. Why didn't he choose one family? Why did he let all of us drown in his lies? Sarah looked down at her hands. He tried. The rage rose again. He tried? When? Tell me one moment he truly tried. She looked up, and there was truth in her eyes. Painful truth. The night he changed the will. I froze. What do you mean? She took a shaky breath and leaned in. 7 years ago, after he learned about his illness, he drove to your house. He told me he was going to confess everything. To end it. He was shaking, terrified. He said he couldn't lie anymore. I stared, hardly breathing. But when he arrived, he saw you through the kitchen window. You were cooking with your daughters, talking, laughing. It was the first time he'd seen you all together like that in a while. He told me he stood there watching, realizing he couldn't destroy that moment, couldn't destroy your world. My hand covered my mouth as I trembled. Sarah whispered. He returned to me that night, and he cried. I had never seen him cry like that. He said, I can't be the man who ruins her life. I can't. He chose you that night, Elizabeth. He chose your family. Silence. A long, suffocating silence. My heart broke in a new, unexplainable way. Not for him, but for the twisted complexity of the love I thought I understood. He promised me he'd end things with me slowly, gently. But then his illness worsened, and he panicked again. He tried to please everyone and ended up destroying us all. I sank back in my seat, exhausted, overwhelmed by grief so layered it was impossible to untangle. Then Sarah added, almost whispering into her hands, and I would have left. I swear I would have walked away. But then Lily got sick. The words hung in the air. A chill ran through me. What do you mean? Her lips trembled. When Lily was 6, she was diagnosed with a condition, a cardiac condition, the same one William had. My blood ran cold. She needed medical care, treatments, surgery, and the insurance only covered part of it. William was terrified. He couldn't leave our daughter when she was fighting for her life. Everything inside me turned to stone. Lily almost died. Elizabeth! Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she whispered. He didn't stay because he loved me more. He stayed because he was afraid that if he left, our daughter wouldn't survive. That she'd hate him in her last moments. That she'd think he abandoned her. My breath shook uncontrollably. I felt my anger melting into something far more dangerous. Grief so complicated it had no name. Sarah's voice was barely audible now. He was a coward, yes. He lied, yes. He hurt you, yes. But he was also a father trying to keep a sick child alive. And he carried the guilt every second of his life. It killed him long before his heart did. She wiped her eyes. You have every right to hate him. To hate me, but please, don't hate Lily. She didn't choose this. She paid the highest price of all. And suddenly, I broke, but not with screams, not with rage, with silent, shaking tears. For a life I thought I lived. For the man I loved. For the daughters who were lied to. For the child who never got to know her place in the world. I whispered, voice raw. What am I supposed to do with this truth? Sarah's answer was soft and devastating. You decide whether this story ends with more pain or finally with healing. The envelope felt heavier than any object I had ever held, not because of its physical weight, but because of what it might contain. Truth, lies, excuses, or a final betrayal wearing the mask of love. I held it for several seconds, afraid that opening it would make everything real in a way I could never undo. Will you stay while I read it? I asked her. The young woman shook her head gently. It's between you and him, but for what it's worth, he spoke about you with respect. He said you saved his life once. Emotionally. I mean, she stood, wiped her palms on her skirt, eyes shining with tears she tried to hide. Before leaving, she added softly, I know I don't deserve kindness from you, but I want you to know, if I had known the full truth from the start, I would never have stayed. You didn't just lose a husband, Beatrice. You lost the version of him he let you believe in. I'm sorry for that. When she left, the walls seemed to close in on me, leaving me alone with the envelope that felt like a ticking bomb. My hands trembled as I broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten letter, several pages long, his familiar cursive slant, the same style he used in birthday and anniversary notes. But this ink felt different, heavy, final. I began to read. My dearest B, if you're reading this, I am gone. Not a day of my life passes that I don't feel undeserving of the love you gave me. You were the safest place I ever knew, the person who held me when I was at my worst and celebrated me at my best. You deserved a better husband than I was. I won't make excuses. I won't insult you with lies wrapped in pretty words. I betrayed you. I broke the vows I made at that altar, and for that, I will carry regret into whatever comes after death. I met Angela during a time when I was weak. Not physically, but emotionally. You remember when I lost my job that first time? When I felt like less of a man? You held the family together with grace, but I felt small next to your strength. I was ashamed, B. Ashamed that you married a man who kept failing to give you the life you deserved. I sought validation elsewhere, not love. But then, it became more complicated. She became dependent and I felt responsible. And when the children came, I couldn't abandon them. I know that sounds hollow, but it's the truth. I lived a double life because I was a coward. Too afraid to hurt you. Too afraid to lose her. Too weak to choose. You once told me the worst type of betrayal isn't leaving. It's making someone believe you're theirs while you belong to someone else. I did that to you. And to her, no one won. But B, if there's one thing I beg of you, it's this. Please don't let the last years of our marriage make you doubt the beginning. Not everything was a lie. You were the greatest part of my life. My anchor, my home, the happiest I ever was with you. You saved me, more than you will ever know. I'm sorry I couldn't be the man you deserved. Arthur, I didn't realize I had been holding my breath until the last line. When I finished reading, something inside me cracked. But this time, something else seeped through the fracture. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the first drop of clarity. I folded the letter slowly, carefully, as if the paper carried his remaining pulse. I didn't cry the way I expected. Instead of collapsing, I sat back in silence, letting the weight of his truth settle inside me. For 40 years I had been his wife. For 16 years she had been his. Something else. He loved us both. And yet he destroyed us both. I looked around at my home. The life we'd built. The memories hanging on the walls. The echoes of laughter, arguments, holidays, grandchildren running through the hallway. Had all of that been real? Yes, real, but incomplete. Later that night, after hours of sitting with his words, I walked to the fireplace with the letter in my hand. But I didn't burn it. I placed it in a small wooden box. The same one that held his old love letters to me, ticket stubs from our first movie date, and the dried daisy from the day he proposed, because the truth, ugly as it was, belonged with the history of our marriage. Not erased, but acknowledged. I didn't forgive him. Not then. But I did something that surprised even me. I chose myself for the first time in decades. And that was the beginning of the rest of my story. Grief doesn't end when the tears dry. Sometimes that's when the real war begins. For 2 weeks after reading Arthur's letter, I moved through my home like a ghost. I ate because my body forced me to, not because I tasted anything. I slept only when exhaustion pinned me down. My days were quiet, too quiet. After 40 years of sharing space with someone, silence feels like an intruder. But the world doesn't pause for heartbreak. It was the phone call that pulled me back into the flames of his betrayal. A lawyer's office, Arthur's estate, a meeting required, with both families present. I almost laughed at the absurd cruelty of it. He couldn't face us together when he was alive, yet now we were being forced into the same room to divide the pieces of his life. The morning of the meeting, I stood in the mirror longer than necessary. I wore a dark navy dress, simple pearl earrings, and tied my silver hair neatly, not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because dignity is the last armor a woman wears when her heart has been shattered. When I arrived at the law office, I saw them already in the waiting area. Her and them. Angela sat stiffly, holding her sons close. They looked so small, wearing matching shirts and nervous expressions. She rose when she saw me, giving a respectful nod. Not a smile, not an assumption of familiarity. Just acknowledgement. I appreciated that. The boys looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and guilt, as if they expected me to hate them. But how could I? They were innocent. Their existence wasn't betrayal. His choices were. Before anyone could speak, the conference room door opened, and the attorney, Mr. Holden, invited us in. We sat at opposite sides of the long table, a symbolic divide that matched the emotional one. He cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses. "Thank you for coming. I know this is difficult for everyone. Arthur left a will, updated 2 years ago. 2 years ago, while he was still living his double life. We will go through the assets, property, accounts, and personal letters he left for each of you." Angela tensed beside her sons. I clasped my hands to steady them under the table. "First," he continued, "Arthur left a letter of instructions, one for Beatrice, one for Angela, and one addressed to both families." Angela's eyes flicked to mine. I stayed still. Holden began. "Arthur requested that his assets be divided into 3 portions." 3? My heart dropped. 1 share for Beatrice, his legal wife. 1 share placed in trust for the education and care of his 2 sons. I heard Angela release a breath. Relief. Gratitude. Maybe guilt. And 1 final share, to be sold and donated to a charity, Arthur specified. I blinked. 1/3 of our life. To charity? Which charity? I asked quietly. Holden hesitated before answering. Second Chances Foundation. An organization for helping men rebuild their lives after job loss or emotional collapse. I felt it like a punch to the chest. The charity reflected the exact moment he broke and turned away from me. He had immortalized his guilt in his will. As Holden continued listing items, the house in my name, the small apartment Angela lived in now being secured for her and the boys, the bank accounts. Emotions simmered beneath the surface. No screaming, no accusations, just sadness. When the formalities ended, Holden said, "There is one last letter, and he wished for it to be read with both families present." Angela's hands trembled. He unfolded the final letter and read aloud. "To the women my choices hurt, and the children who deserve better than my actions. I created a wound between you, one that none of you asked for. B, you gave me loyalty for a lifetime. Angela, you gave me forgiveness I never earned. None of you were replaceable. I was simply a man too weak to choose the right path. I hope one day, not for my sake but for your own peace, you can look at each other without seeing the betrayal I caused. My final request is simple. Do not let my legacy be pain. Let it be understanding." Silence crushed the room. For several seconds, no one moved. Then the youngest boy, barely 7, whispered to his mother, thinking no one else could hear. Is she our grandma too?" My chest tightened so suddenly I had to grip the table. Angela's eyes widened, panic filling them. She opened her mouth to hush him, to apologize. But before she could, I spoke. My voice was soft, fragile but honest. I don't know if I'm ready for that title, but none of this is your fault, and I don't want you to ever feel unwelcome in this world because of the choices your father made." Angela's eyes filled instantly. A tear slid down her cheek. The boys stared at me, waiting, afraid of rejection. Slowly, I turned to them and added, "You didn't take anything from me. You didn't break my life. He did. And you deserve love, not punishment." For the first time since the funeral, Angela let out a sob she had been holding for years. Not just weeks. Maybe she had been living with half love, half truth, half identity all this time too. She whispered through tears, "Thank you. You don't know what that means." But I did. Because for the first time since Arthur's death, when I left that room, I felt something unexpected. A tiny flicker of peace. Not forgiveness. Not closure. Just the first breath that didn't hurt. For days after the meeting at the lawyer's office, the atmosphere in my home softened. Not healed, but less raw. The letter, the division of assets, the quiet dignity of that painful encounter, it all settled like dust after a storm. Life didn't return to normal, because there was no normal left to return to. Instead, a fragile new version of life began, one where every memory was tinted with two truths, the love I had and the lie behind it. It was a cloudy Thursday afternoon when I heard a knock at my door. Not a polite knock, a hesitant one, almost guilty, like the person on the other side wasn't sure they should be there at all. When I opened the door, Angela stood there, alone this time. Her face looked different than before. The first time I met her, she wore grief. The second time, fear and shame. Today, there was something else. Resolve. "May I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside without a word. She walked inside with a folded envelope clutched in her hand. She sat on the same chair she had occupied days earlier, but her posture wasn't tense now. It was weighed down, as if she had come to lay a burden at my feet. Before I could offer tea or speak, she inhaled deeply. "There's something I need to tell you," she said. "Something that will hurt you. But you deserve the truth." My stomach tightened. But I forced myself to stay composed. "I won't pretend I didn't hate you at first," I admitted softly. "Honesty deserved honesty." She nodded. "And I hated you too, for being the woman he chose first. The woman with the wedding ring, the name, the life. I always felt like the lesser one." Her voice wavered, but she continued. "But I kept a secret from you, from everyone, and I can't carry it anymore." She placed the envelope on the coffee table between us. "It's from Arthur. Another letter? He wrote it for you, but asked me not to deliver it unless I believed you were strong enough to read it." A chill ran through me. "How long have you had it?" I asked. Her answer made my heart stop. 8 years. 8 years. He had written something 8 years before his death, and she had held on to it all this time. My fingers grazed the envelope, but I didn't open it yet. Angela looked down at her hands. "Before you read it, I need to say something first. Something I never thought I'd confess." Silence stretched between us. Dense. Heavy. She swallowed. "Arthur didn't just turn to me because he was weak or ashamed of failing you." Her voice cracked. "He turned to me because I reminded him of her." I blinked. "Who?" She met my eyes, and the sorrow in hers warned me I wasn't ready for what came next. "Your daughter," my breath seized. "My only child. My baby girl. The one we lost when she was 19. A car accident. Sudden. Brutal. A wound that never fully healed." I felt the room tilt, the world blur. Angela rushed to explain, tears spilling fast now. "I wasn't replacing you. I wasn't replacing your marriage. He was a broken father who never recovered from losing his daughter. I was only 26 when I met him. The same age she would have been. And I looked like her. The same hair, the same smile. He told me that the first year." My chest tightened with a pain I hadn't felt since my daughter's funeral. A pain that lived under my ribs, untouched for decades. Are you saying he loved you because you were a reminder of my child? Angela covered her face, sobbing. Yes, and I hated it. I hated knowing that part of his attachment to me came from grief, not love. I stayed because I believed I could help him. But I never replaced you in his heart. Not as a wife, not as a soulmate. I felt dizzy, as if someone had ripped open an old wound with their bare hands. Angela wiped her tears and whispered, "He loved you, Bea. More than anyone. I was a refuge. You were home." The envelope between us suddenly felt hotter than fire. "What's in this letter?" I asked, my voice thin. She shook her head gently. "His truth, the part he couldn't tell you while he was alive, the part that broke him." She stood to leave, pausing at the doorway. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just didn't want you to spend the rest of your life thinking you weren't enough." Her voice steadied with newfound grace. "You were everything. I was just where he hid when he couldn't face his pain. And then she was gone, leaving me alone with a letter that carried a truth Arthur had buried 8 years before his death. A truth connected to our daughter." My hands trembled as I picked it up. This wasn't a letter about infidelity. It was a letter about grief, guilt, and a pain deeper than betrayal. As I opened it, I braced myself, because I knew what I was about to read would change not how I saw Arthur, but how I saw the life we lived. The envelope felt warm in my hands, as if the truth inside it had been waiting, breathing, wanting to be set free after 8 long, silent years. I sat in the living room, the evening light fading into a soft amber glow. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you hear your own heartbeat. I took a deep breath, unfolded the letter, and began reading. My beloved Bea, if this letter has found its way to your hands, it means many years have passed, and I was too much of a coward to speak these words to you, when I should have. I pray that you are sitting down, and that your heart is steady, because what I am about to confess is the hardest truth I have ever carried. 8 years ago, something happened. Something that shattered me in a way I never recovered from. I know you grieved our daughter, but the burden I held after her death is not the same burden you carried. You lost a child when she died, but I lost her before the accident. There is no gentle way to say this, only the truth. Our daughter was angry with me in the months before she died. She found out about Angela. Not the full story, but enough. She overheard a phone call, one I never meant for her to hear. She confronted me. She begged me to tell you. She said she wouldn't carry the secret for me. She told me I was breaking our family. Breaking you, I begged her not to tell you. I begged my own daughter to protect my lies. She left the house that night after our argument. She was crying. She was upset. And I let her drive. I let her leave in that emotional state. I told myself she would cool down and come back. But she never did. You believed the accident was fate. I have lived every day, knowing that my betrayal pushed her out the door. You always wondered why I couldn't look you in the eyes when you spoke of her, why I visited her grave alone, why I never forgave myself. Now you know. The night we lost her, I didn't just lose a daughter. I lost the version of myself that could ever be redeemed. I know you think I strayed years after the pain of losing her, but the truth is, my sin came first. Her death was the consequence of who I had already become. Angela was not my escape from a failing marriage. She was the reminder of the daughter I failed. She reminded me of her innocence, her youth, her warmth. I clung to that resemblance like a drowning man clings to a piece of driftwood. I know how this sounds. I know how it hurts. I know how impossible forgiveness must feel. But I need you to know one final truth. I loved you more than any wrong I ever committed. And that truth makes my betrayal even more shameful. You were my greatest blessing, Bea. My home, my peace. And I repaid you with a wound I can never heal. If love alone could undo the past, I would rewrite every moment of weakness. I would tell you the truth before our daughter ever heard it. I would hold her back from walking out that door. I would take the pain instead. I did not deserve to be your husband, but I was grateful every day that I was. If you can ever find it in your heart to forgive me, not for me, but for yourself, please do. Do not let the love we once had rot in the shadow of my mistakes. Everything I failed to be in life, I hope this truth, finally spoken, allows you to be free in the years you have left. Your heart was the best thing I ever had. I'm sorry. I'm so deeply, unforgivably sorry. Arthur, when my eyes reached the final word, I didn't scream. I didn't cry the way one expects a widow to when reading a confession that rewrites her entire life. I felt stillness, a hollow, heartbreaking stillness that settled into the deepest parts of me like winter frost. For years I thought I had lost my daughter to fate, but fate had nothing to do with it. It was him, his choices, his lies, his cowardice. I folded the letter with trembling hands, not neatly, not carefully, just enough to keep it from slipping apart as I placed it back into the envelope. I sat there for what felt like hours. The past 40 years of my life played in my mind like a film with missing scenes. Scenes that had always been there, just hidden from me. I thought of the little moments, the nights he sat outside alone, staring at the stars, the way he flinched whenever I mentioned our daughter's last day, the silent guilt that aged him more than time did. He didn't just betray me as a husband, he betrayed me as a father. And somehow, knowing the truth, hurt more than the lie ever did. When I finally stood, I walked to the small wooden box again, the one that held his memory, the one I had placed his first letter inside days ago. But this time I didn't add the new one. I took the box and emptied it. Every memory, every letter, every dried flower petal, and anniversary note. I placed them in the fireplace, one by one. Then I added the final letter on top. I did not keep a single piece of him. As the flames rose, the smoke curled upward as if carrying his words into the night sky. I watched until nothing remained but ash. The same way our marriage now felt, not erased, but acknowledged, burned, released. I whispered not to him, but to myself. You cannot heal while holding the hands of a ghost. For the first time in decades, the house didn't feel like a shrine to a man I loved. It felt like mine. I opened the windows, letting in air that didn't taste of grief. The night breeze carried something unfamiliar into the room, something I hadn't felt in years. Lightness. Not joy. Not yet, but the beginning of it. I stepped outside and looked up at the sky. For 40 years I built a life with a man who loved me, hurt me, and broke me in equal measure. But what remained after the truth? Me still standing, still breathing, still here, and for the first time in my old age I knew. The rest of my life would no longer belong to his memory. It would belong to me.